My grandson's graduation was supposed to be a joyous day. But my daughter-in-law, Victoria, made sure I knew I was only invited out of obligation, a mere afterthought. She even tried to dictate my presence. I just smiled, planning something much bigger than a simple speech. You won't believe what happened next. Like, share, and let us know where you are listening from. The heavy cream envelope felt unusually significant in Sylvie's hand, its expensive weight a stark contrast to the usual junk mail or utility bills. Her name, meticulously calligraphed, hinted at something important. She tore it open, her heart giving a little flutter of curiosity, only to have it leap into her throat with a jolt of pure, disbelieving joy. It was an invitation to Ethan's graduation from Stanford. A wave of emotions washed over her. Immense pride for her brilliant grandson, followed by a familiar, bitter pang of disbelief. An invitation from Victoria? It was almost unheard of. For years, Sylvie had been systematically excluded from family events. A silent, gradual erasure orchestrated by her daughter-in-law. Birthdays, holidays, anniversaries. They had all passed without so much as a phone call, let alone an invitation to celebrate. Yet, here it was, in black and gold lettering, an official acknowledgement of Ethan's achievement and, by extension, her place in his life, however tenuous. She immediately called Brenda, her oldest and dearest friend, her voice trembling slightly as she read the card aloud. Can you believe it, Brenda? Victoria actually sent me an invitation. Brenda's chuckle was wry. Well, miracles do happen, I suppose. Or more likely, Ethan put his foot down. You know how that boy is. He's always been different. Brenda's words, though affirming, carried a hidden barb of truth that Sylvie knew well. Victoria's inclusion of her was undoubtedly a forced gesture, a concession to Ethan's will rather than genuine warmth. Sylvie settled into her armchair, the invitation resting in her lap, her gaze distant. She remembered the early years, before Victoria's frosty demeanor had solidified into an impenetrable wall. Her son, Daniel, had tried to mediate once or twice. But Victoria's subtle manipulations and cutting remarks had always won out, leaving Daniel to retreat into a passive silence that became a painful form of complicity. He loved his mother, Sylvie knew, but he loved his peace more. And Victoria was adept at ensuring he rarely had both when Sylvie was involved. Ethan, however, had always been her anchor. He was the only one who consistently reached out, who remembered her birthday with a thoughtful card, who called just to chat about his day. He possessed a kindness, an innate thoughtfulness that reminded Sylvie so much of Arthur, her late husband. Arthur had been a beacon of gentle wisdom, a man who believed in family above all else. Ethan, with his quiet strength and academic brilliance, was Arthur's legacy in so many ways. He carried Arthur's intellect, but also his heart. Her thoughts turned to a small, lacquered box tucked away in her bedroom armoire. Inside, nestled on a velvet cushion, lay Arthur's vintage Omega watch. It was a beautiful piece, a classic chronograph with a rich leather strap, inherited from Arthur's own father. On his deathbed, Arthur had held Sylvie's hand, his voice weak but clear. Give it to Ethan, my dear. When the time is right, he'll know what it means. For years, Sylvie had kept it safe, waiting for that nebulous right time. Now, seeing the Stanford crest on the invitation, she knew. This was it. Ethan's graduation wasn't just a milestone. It was a testament to the future Arthur had always envisioned for his grandson, a future where the values of family and legacy would hopefully endure. With renewed purpose, Sylvie picked up her phone to call Victoria, bracing herself. She needed to confirm her attendance, not just for herself, but for Ethan. The phone rang 3 times before Victoria answered, her voice cool and crisp. Yes? Sylvie? Hello, Victoria. I received Ethan's graduation invitation. I just wanted to confirm that I'll be attending, Sylvie stated, trying to keep her own voice even, devoid of any emotional tremor. There was a slight pause on the other end, a barely perceptible sigh. "Oh, yes." Ethan was very insistent. "He wanted to make sure you were there." The words hung in the air, a thinly veiled implication that Sylvie was only a grudging concession, not a welcome guest. "We've reserved a seat for you, of course. Near the back, for the overflow guests. The main section is quite full with immediate family and faculty." Sylvie's heart sank a little, but she refused to let Victoria's passive aggression chip away at her resolve. "That will be perfectly fine, Victoria. I just want to see Ethan graduate. It's a tremendous achievement." "Indeed," Victoria replied, her tone flat. "Well, we're all very proud. Is there anything else?" No offer of shared excitement, no suggestion of meeting for coffee, no attempt to bridge the vast chasm between them, just a swift, dismissive end to the conversation. Despite the cold reception, Sylvie's determination to be there for Ethan remained unshakable. The sharp edge of her initial excitement was dulled, but the core flame of love for her grandson still burned bright. She would go. She would sit wherever she was placed, and she would witness his triumph. She imagined Victoria's icy politeness, Daniel's averted gaze, perhaps even the children of her other son, Mark, who might not even recognize her anymore. It would be an uncomfortable gauntlet to run. In the days leading up to the ceremony, Sylvie meticulously planned her attire, chosen not for flash but for quiet elegance. She wanted to arrive with dignity, a testament to her enduring presence, not a desperate plea for attention. She longed for a time when family gatherings were simple, joyful affairs, when her grandchildren ran to her with open arms. That emptiness, the quiet hum of her solitary life, often felt like a physical ache. Brenda called again the evening before the graduation. "Remember what we talked about, Sylvie," she said gently. "This day isn't about Victoria or Daniel. It's about Ethan. You go there for him, and only him. Hold your head high." Sylvie took a deep breath. "You're right, Brenda. Thank you." She knew it would be a challenge, an emotional tightrope walk. But for Ethan, she would face it all. The Omega watch was carefully wrapped, ready to be presented, a symbol of a love that spanned generations, a love that Victoria could never diminish. The morning of Ethan's graduation dawned with a crisp, California brightness, a stark contrast to the churning anxiety in Sylvie's stomach. She had dressed with meticulous care, choosing a tailored navy suit with a pearl necklace, understated elegance, as Brenda had advised. Her hair was neatly coiffed, her makeup subtle. In her hands, carefully clutched, was a small, velvet-covered box containing Arthur's Omega watch, its weight a comforting, tangible connection to her past and her purpose. She arrived at the Stanford Auditorium a full 90 minutes early, wanting to avoid any rush, any potential awkward encounters before the ceremony began. A cheerful student volunteer, barely older than Ethan himself, greeted her at the grand entrance. "Welcome to Stanford graduation. Are you here for a particular graduate?" "Yes," Sylvie replied, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Ethan Winters." "Ah, Winters. Wonderful. His family seating is through here, ma'am." The student gestured towards a wide aisle leading into the main hall. Sylvie thanked her, following the stream of early arrivals. Her heart a cautious mix of hope and apprehension. She found herself at the entrance to Section C, a prime area clearly marked family seating. An usher, a polite young man in a dark suit, scanned her small invitation card. He nodded, then frowned slightly as he typed something into a handheld device. "Winters family? Yes. We have premium seating assigned for them. However, for a Sylvie Mendes, it shows auxiliary seating." "Section G, ma'am." He pointed vaguely towards the very back of the vast auditorium, a cavernous space already filling with murmurings and excited whispers. Sylvie's heart, which had begun to lighten with the morning sunshine, sank instantly. Auxiliary seating. It sounded exactly as it felt, an afterthought, an obligation, a place of minimal importance. She felt a familiar, cold prickle of humiliation. Victoria hadn't just placed her in the back, She'd relegated her to a different class of guest entirely. With a polite but firm nod, the usher directed her. "Just follow this aisle, ma'am. Section G is at the very rear. There are a few columns, but you should have a view of the main stage on the screens." Screens. Not even a direct view. It was a calculated insult, designed to emphasize her distance from the core family, her peripheral status. As Sylvie walked, each step felt heavier than the last. The grand architecture of the auditorium, meant to inspire awe, now seemed to mock her. She navigated past rows of excited families, their faces alight with anticipation, until she reached the very last section. Here, the hum of conversation was muted, replaced by the occasional cough or rustle. Sure enough, thick, ornate columns partially obscured the main stage, making a direct view impossible. She scanned the rows for her designated spot. G14. There it was, a single seat tucked almost against a pillar. On the seat lay a small, plain white card. Her name, Sylvie Mendes, handwritten in elegant cursive. But beneath it, scrawled in a more hurried, almost aggressive hand, were 4 words that sent a shiver down her spine. "Better if she doesn't come." Sylvie recognized Victoria's distinctive, angular handwriting immediately. It was the same script that had signed the terse notes accompanying Christmas gifts she had received over the years. Gifts clearly chosen by Victoria, not Daniel. A wave of nausea washed over her. It wasn't just an auxiliary seat. It was a deliberate, personal message of unwelcomeness. Just as the full weight of the words hit her, a young usher, looking genuinely concerned, approached her row. "Ma'am, is everything all right? Can I help you find your seat?" Sylvie, with surprising speed and an almost involuntary reflex, snatched up the card and slipped it into her clutch, concealing the damning message from the usher's view. She forced a strained smile. "Yes, thank you. I've found it." She sat down, the velvet box containing Arthur's watch still heavy in her lap, but now its weight felt like an anchor dragging her down. She processed the deliberate act of humiliation, the meticulous planning Victoria must have put into ensuring her discomfort. Ethan's wish for her to be there had been twisted into an opportunity for calculated spite. Victoria hadn't just tolerated her presence, she had weaponized it. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The auditorium continued to fill, the anticipation building around her. Then, through the growing din, Sylvie heard voices approaching from the aisle behind her, heading towards the front of the auditorium. Familiar voices. "I still can't believe she actually showed up." Victoria's voice, sharper and clearer than the others, cut through the ambient noise. "I almost gave her the wrong time, you know. It would have saved us all the trouble." Sylvie froze, her blood running cold. They were walking past her section, completely unaware of her proximity. Daniel's voice, softer, almost a murmur, replied, "Victoria, Ethan really wanted her here. It's his day." Ethan. Victoria scoffed, her tone dripping with disdain. "He's too soft-hearted. What does that old bat care about his graduation? She's probably just here for the free lunch at the reception, same as always. Always looking for a handout. Always finding a way to intrude." The old criticisms, the familiar slurs, were recycled, hurled into the air as if they were fresh grievances. Sylvie felt a tremor run through her. The old bat. It was a phrase Victoria had used before, usually behind Sylvie's back, but never so openly, so cruelly, within earshot. And Daniel, her son, her own flesh and blood, remained silent. Sylvie could hear his footsteps, the slight hesitation in his stride, a clear indication of his discomfort, his internal conflict, but he offered no defense, no word of support, no acknowledgement of his mother's right to be there. He simply walked on, leaving Sylvie exposed to the raw, unfiltered malice of his wife. Sylvie sat motionless, the velvet gift box digging into her palm. Her vision blurred, but she refused to cry. She absolutely refused. To shed a tear would be to give Victoria the satisfaction of knowing her cruelty had struck its mark. It would be a victory Victoria did not deserve. The ceremony had not even begun, and already, the humiliation was complete. The vast auditorium hummed with a joyful cacophony, a symphony of proud whispers, eager laughter, and the rustle of programs. Around Sylvie, families embraced, parents dabbed at tears of joy, and siblings pointed excitedly as familiar faces appeared on the distant stage. Each loving interaction, each shared smile, served to amplify Sylvie's own isolation, a stark spotlight on her sorrow. She felt like a phantom, present but unseen, a ghost at her grandson's celebration. The cruel words of Victoria still echoed in her ears, the weight of the hidden note in her purse pressing down on her spirit. A desperate thought flickered. Just leave. Slip out unnoticed, mail Arthur's watch to Ethan, and spare herself any further humiliation, any more of Victoria's calculated coldness, or Daniel's awkward avoidance. She could disappear back into her quiet life, pretend she was never here, never heard the stinging words. The idea held a seductive allure of escape. Sylvie shifted, half rising from her seat, her muscles protesting the sudden movement. Just then, through a gap in the surging crowd near a side entrance, she caught a glimpse. A flash of a blue cap and gown, a familiar head of dark hair, and then, unmistakably, Ethan. He was lining up with the other graduates, a calm, proud expression on his face, ready to embark on the next chapter of his life. Seeing him, so vibrant and full of promise, reignited a spark within Sylvie. He was the reason she was here. Not Victoria, not Daniel, but Ethan. Slowly, deliberately, Sylvie sank back into her seat. The urge to flee receded, replaced by a quiet, fierce resolve. She would stay. For Ethan, she would not let Victoria's malice, or Daniel's cowardice, diminish this moment for her grandson. She would bear witness to his achievement, a testament to her enduring love. The ceremony began with a flourish of trumpets and a procession of robed faculty. From her obscured vantage point in Section G, Sylvie strained to catch glimpses of the stage, her gaze constantly sweeping the sea of graduates, searching for Ethan. Her heart swelled with an almost unbearable pride each time she managed to spot his distinctive profile, his earnest attention to the speeches. She adjusted her glasses, leaning forward, willing herself to see past the imposing column. A kind-looking couple next to her, noticing her efforts, leaned over. "Are you with one of the graduates, dear?" the woman asked, her voice soft and friendly. Sylvie managed a small smile. "Yes, my grandson, Ethan Winters. He's graduating today." "Oh, how wonderful," the man exclaimed. "We're here for our granddaughter. It's such a shame you're so far back. You must be very proud." "I am, immensely," Sylvie replied, her voice thick with emotion. She paused, then offered a vague explanation. "There was a bit of a seating mix-up. But it's all right. I'm just happy to be here." The lie felt uncomfortable, but the alternative, airing her family's dirty laundry, was unthinkable. The cruel note in her purse seemed to burn against her side, a constant, ugly reminder of Victoria's years of calculated exclusion. Yet, she also recalled Arthur's calm, steady voice. "Sylvie, my dear, in times of adversity, stand tall. Let your dignity be your shield." Victoria would not win. She would not diminish Sylvie's presence, not on Ethan's special day. Sylvie straightened her shoulders, resolved. She might be hidden in the back, but her heart was front and center, full of love and pride. Through a small, clear gap between the column and the wall, Sylvie occasionally caught sight of the front rows. She saw Victoria, holding her phone, casually recording snippets of the ceremony, occasionally turning to chat with another woman. Her posture was relaxed, self-satisfied. Next to her, Daniel sat ramrod straight, his shoulders stiff, his gaze fixed on the stage. He rarely moved, rarely engaged with Victoria. Sylvie watched him, a profound sadness settling over her. When had her once kind, resolute son, the boy who used to defend her against playground bullies, become so passive, so utterly conflict-averse? The dynamic between them was a carefully constructed facade, a show of togetherness that masked a deep, unacknowledged chasm. There was no warmth, no genuine connection, only the uncomfortable tension of two people occupying the same space, playing a role. Then, the moment arrived. "Ethan Winters!" The announcer's voice boomed through the hall. Sylvie stood, unthinking, almost involuntarily, her heart leaping. She clapped, wholeheartedly, enthusiastically, even though her vision of him was fleeting. A quick glimpse of his bright, intelligent face as he accepted his diploma, a brief handshake with the dean. Tears pricked her eyes. But they were tears of pure joy and pride, not sorrow. He had done it. Her Ethan. Her brilliant grandson. As the ceremony wound down and the final benedictions were given, Sylvie made a decision. She would not seek out Victoria. There would be no confrontation, no awkward pleasantries. She would not allow Victoria to steal another moment of joy. Instead, she would find Ethan directly. She would present him with Arthur's watch, tell him how incredibly proud she was, and then she would leave, her mission accomplished. She carefully put away her program, adjusting the strap of her purse. Her resolve had solidified. She would maintain her grace, and she would focus solely on Ethan's achievement, letting nothing else taint this precious memory. The crowd began to stir, a low rumble building as people prepared to exit. Sylvie took a deep breath, readying herself for the next step. The Stanford courtyard after the graduation ceremony was a swirling vortex of exhilarated humanity. Caps flew through the air, cameras flashed, and joyful shouts mingled with emotional embraces. Sylvie, holding Arthur's watch firmly in her hand, scanned the sea of graduates in their flowing gowns, her eyes darting through the vibrant chaos, searching for Ethan. Her heart thumped with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. She knew a moment of quiet with him might be hard to come by. Then, a familiar head of dark hair turned, and Ethan's eyes met hers across the throng. A broad, genuine smile lit his face. With surprising agility, he began to weave through the clusters of people, his cap askew, until he reached her. "Grandma Sylvie! You're here!" he exclaimed, pulling her into a warm, strong hug that momentarily took her breath away. "I'm so glad you came. I really hoped you would." His voice held a clear note of genuine pleasure and a hint of surprise, a confirmation of Victoria's efforts to keep her away. "Oh, Ethan, my brilliant boy," Sylvie murmured, tears welling in her eyes. "I wouldn't have missed it for the world. I'm so incredibly proud of you." She pulled back slightly, looking up at his handsome, beaming face. "You were wonderful. You really were." Ethan's smile softened. "Did you get a good seat? I hope you could see everything." Sylvie met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "I saw everything, dear. Every single moment that mattered." She avoided the specific details, unwilling to burden him with Victoria's machinations. Not yet. This was his moment, unsullied. She lifted the velvet box. "I have something for you." Before she could offer him the watch, a sharp, familiar voice cut through the air, slicing through their tender moment. "Ethan! There you are. We need to get these immediate family photos done. The lunch reservation is in 45 minutes. Victoria, looking impeccably styled and radiating a brittle efficiency, swept towards them, Daniel trailing a few paces behind her, his face a mask of weary discomfort. Victoria gave Sylvie a quick, almost imperceptible nod, her eyes flicking over her dismissively. "Sylvie, glad you made it." Her tone implied the exact opposite. She then turned her full attention to Ethan. "All right, let's get a few shots with your father and me. Then we can do some with the grandparents, maybe a couple with Sylvie at the end, if there's time before we lose the light." Ethan's brow furrowed, his cheerful demeanor dimming slightly. Grandma is immediate family. Mom, he stated, his voice firm, tinged with a confusion that was almost heartbreaking. He looked from Victoria to Sylvie, as if trying to reconcile the two. An awkward silence descended, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the distant sounds of celebration. Daniel shifted his weight, his eyes on his shoes. Just as the tension threatened to suffocate them, an unexpected interruption occurred. A young usher, the same concerned girl from Section G, hurried towards them, a small, elegant leather purse in her hand. "Excuse me, Mr. Winters." "Ma'am?" She addressed Sylvie. "I believe this is yours. I found it tucked under your seat in Section G. And," she continued, her voice dropping to a mortified whisper, "I am so terribly sorry about the note on your seat card. That was completely inappropriate, and I've already reported it to my supervisor. We don't tolerate that kind of behavior here at Stanford." She thrust the purse into Sylvie's hands, her face flushed with embarrassment. And then, realizing her colossal blunder, spun on her heel and practically fled back into the crowd. Ethan, whose eyes had widened as the usher spoke, immediately turned to Sylvie, his voice sharp with concern. "What note? Grandma, what is she talking about?" His gaze then darted to Victoria, a flicker of suspicion entering his eyes. Victoria, her face suddenly pale, rushed to intervene. "Oh, that. It was just a little mix-up, darling. A clerical error, I suppose. These things happen with so many guests." She gave a forced, brittle laugh, attempting to wave away the incident. But Sylvie, holding her recovered purse, felt a surge of cold resolve. This was it. The moment she had dreaded, yet also, in a strange way, anticipated. She reached into her purse, retrieved the small white card, and without a word, handed it to Ethan. "It's not a mix-up, Ethan," she said, her voice calm and steady, betraying none of the turmoil she felt. "It was on my seat, G14. Ethan took the card, his fingers brushing against hers. His eyes scanned the elegant script of his name, then dropped to the hastily scrawled message beneath. As he read the words, "Better if she doesn't come," his face darkened, turning from confusion to a dangerous, icy stillness. His jaw tightened. He looked up, his gaze fixing on Victoria, his eyes blazing with a quiet fury. "What is this, Mom?" he demanded, his voice low and tight. "What does this mean?" Victoria's carefully constructed composure began to crack, her paleness intensified, and she took a step back. "Ethan, I was seated in Section G, Ethan, at the very back," Sylvie interjected, her voice still measured, behind a pillar, with no direct view of the stage, "and that card was placed specifically on my seat." She looked at Daniel, whose eyes were wide with alarm, then back at Victoria. Daniel, finally stirred from his paralysis, found his voice, albeit a shaky one. "Victoria," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Did you write this?" Victoria, cornered, lifted her chin defiantly. "Yes, I wrote it. It was a private note to myself, if you must know. And you," she spat, turning on Daniel. "You agreed that having her here would only complicate things." Ethan, dangerously calm, stepped closer to his mother. "Complicate what, Mom?" he asked, his voice laced with an unfamiliar edge. "What exactly does my grandmother complicate?" The courtyard, buzzing moments before, now seemed to hold its breath. This is where the truth finally explodes. The next part of my story will shock you, as years of misunderstanding unravel in the most unexpected way. Don't miss a second of this emotional climax. Keep watching, like, share, and subscribe to hear how this family saga truly ends. "Complicate what, Mom?" Ethan's voice, dangerously calm, hung in the air, slicing through the courtyard's distant hum. Victoria, her face a mask of escalating panic, visibly wilted under his intense gaze. Complicate everything, Ethan. Victoria finally burst out, her composure shattering into a dramatic monologue. She always complicates things, always criticizing our choices, our home, the way we raise you. She thinks she knows better than everyone. Her voice rose, shrill and accusatory, echoing the phantom grievances she had nurtured for years. That's not true, Victoria, Sylvie interjected softly, but firmly. I have never criticized your choices. For years, I have walked on eggshells, biting my tongue, just to maintain a sliver of connection with my son and grandson. I've only ever wanted to be part of this family. To Sylvie's absolute shock, Daniel stepped forward, his face etched with a newfound resolve. She's right, Victoria. Mom has always been nothing but kind. It was my cowardice that allowed this to go on for so long. I let you shut her out, and I'm so sorry, Mom. His admission hung heavy in the air. A raw, painful truth. Victoria spun on Daniel, her eyes blazing. Cowardice? How dare you? You agreed with me. No, Mom, Ethan cut in, his voice cold. You didn't just complicate things. You actively tried to erase Grandma from my life. Every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering. There was always an excuse. Grandma was busy, or not feeling well, or traveling. You made me believe she simply didn't care to be there. His eyes, usually so gentle, now burned with a mix of betrayal and anger. I thought she was avoiding us. Sylvie felt a physical blow to her chest. Ethan thought she had willingly stayed away. The years of lonely holidays, the missed milestones, the aching silence, she had endured them all, believing she was protecting him from Victoria's animosity. To learn he had interpreted her absence as disinterest shattered her heart. The grief for all those lost moments, those irretrievable years, washed over her in a suffocating wave. Daniel, finally finding his footing, stepped fully between Victoria and Sylvie. This ends now, Victoria, he declared, his voice firm, resolute, a tone Sylvie hadn't heard from him in years. My mother deserves respect. She is my mother, and Ethan's grandmother, and you have no right to treat her this way. In that moment of fragile peace, Sylvie remembered the purpose she had arrived with. She took a deep breath, the velvet box in her hand, a beacon of enduring love. Ethan, she said, her voice trembling slightly, your grandfather, Arthur, wanted you to have this when the time was right. She extended the box. I think the time is right. Ethan took the box, his angry gaze softening as he opened it. Inside, Arthur's vintage Omega watch glinted softly. His eyes widened in recognition. He gently lifted the watch, his thumb tracing the worn inscription on the back. To my son, and his son's son, Arthur. A deep, emotional sigh escaped him. Grandpa Arthur's watch, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He looked up at Sylvie, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Thank you, Grandma. This means so much. He pulled her into another heartfelt embrace, clutching the watch tightly. Victoria, visibly fuming at the shift in focus, attempted to reclaim control. Oh, for heaven's sake, Ethan. It's just an old watch. We have a lunch reservation, and we really need to— No, Mom! Ethan's voice was sharp, cutting her off. He pulled back from Sylvie, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. I want an explanation. A real one. Why did you do this? Why did you keep Grandma Sylvie from me, and make me believe she didn't want to be part of my life? Sylvie, feeling a strange clarity amidst the chaos, took a deep breath. Victoria, she said, her voice calm and unwavering. Can you name one family event in the last 5 years? Just one, that you genuinely invited me to, and truly welcomed me. Victoria faltered, her eyes darting around, searching for an escape. Well, there was Christmas. Last year, she mumbled, her voice weak. No, there wasn't, Mom, Ethan interjected, shaking his head. You told me Grandma Sylvie had a prior engagement that year. The year before, she was sick. The year before that, you said she was out of the country. He looked at Victoria, raw disappointment etched on his face. You made excuses, Mom. Every single time. Daniel stepped forward again, facing Victoria directly. This isn't about Mom, Victoria. It's about you. It's always been about your insecurities. Not anything my mother actually said or did. Victoria recoiled as if struck. My insecurities? That's rich, Daniel. She constantly undermined me, always subtly criticizing, always making comparisons, always talking about George's first wife, how accomplished she was, how perfect her children were. Sylvie stared at Victoria, utterly baffled. George's first wife? She repeated slowly, her brow furrowed. Victoria. Who is George? Arthur was my only husband. I was married to your father for 42 years. A stunned silence fell. Daniel's eyes widened in dawning realization. A look of profound shock spreading across his face. Victoria, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Who do you think my father was? Victoria looked between Sylvie's bewildered face and Daniel's horrified one. Your father? Arthur. And he had a first wife. Before Sylvie. And Sylvie used to talk about how wonderful she was. And then you had all those girlfriends before me, and she would compare me to them too. Victoria, my parents were married for 42 years, Daniel explained, slowly, as if speaking to a child. Arthur was my mother's only husband. The engagement I mentioned once, years ago, was before my mother, not a marriage. I had an aunt named Georgina, but she never married, and certainly never had children. He paused, the full, absurd weight of the misunderstanding crashing down on him. All these years, you thought Mom was constantly comparing you to a fictitious first wife and my ex-girlfriends? Sylvie felt a cold chill run through her, then a wave of bewildered sadness. So, all this time, she said, her voice hushed with disbelief. You've been punishing me for something that never happened. For people who don't even exist. Ethan stared at his mother, the Omega watch clutched in his hand. His face was a mixture of disbelief, anger, and profound sorrow. Years, he whispered, his voice cracking. You stole years of my life with Grandma. Because of this? Sylvie's heart ached with the irretrievable loss, the wasted years of joy and connection. So much time lost, she murmured, a single tear finally escaping. Ethan, looking from his stunned parents to his heartbroken grandmother, tightened his grip on Arthur's watch. No, he declared, his voice firm, resolute. We won't lose any more. The revelations in the courtyard had peeled back layers of resentment, exposing a raw, aching wound. The journey to the reception pavilion, typically a celebratory stroll, became an awkward, reeling procession for the Winters family. Victoria, usually so composed, was uncharacteristically silent, her face pale, and her gaze fixed on the ground. Daniel, his shoulders slumped, walked beside her, occasionally glancing at Sylvie with a look of profound regret. Sylvie, her heart heavy yet strangely lightened by the truth, walked with Ethan, the weight of Arthur's watch now a comfort in his hand. Inside the elegant pavilion, tables were arranged for the graduates and their families. Ethan, ever thoughtful, pulled out a chair for Sylvie at the immediate family table, right next to his own. Grandma, please, he insisted, his voice gentle but firm. Victoria, still subdued, simply nodded her assent, her eyes avoiding Sylvie's. It was a small gesture, but for Sylvie, it spoke volumes. A public acknowledgement of her rightful place. Chloe, Ethan's girlfriend, sensed the palpable tension. With a thoughtful smile, she turned to Sylvie. Ethan told me you were a literature professor, Sylvie. That's incredible. What was your favorite period to teach? Her innocent question was a welcome distraction, a lifeline in the suffocating silence. Sylvie, grateful for the opening, allowed herself to relax slightly. Oh goodness, that's a tough one. I adored the Victorians, but there was a special magic in introducing young minds to Shakespeare. And of course, reading to Ethan as a child was always a joy. She smiled, a wave of tenderness washing over her. We spent countless hours in Narnia, you know. I had different voices for all the characters. A booming Aslan, a whiny Eustace, a grand Edmund. She chuckled softly at the memory. Victoria, who had been listening in silence, looked up, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. I never knew you read him those stories, she admitted, her voice surprisingly soft. He always loved that series. But I didn't realize that connection was there. Sylvie met Victoria's gaze, a hint of challenge, but mostly an offer of peace, in her own eyes. Well, she said, maybe it's time to change that. Daniel, sitting across from Sylvie, leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Mom, he began, his voice choked with emotion. I am so incredibly sorry. For everything. For being a coward. For letting this happen. For not standing up for you. I promise, I will make this right. Starting now. His sincerity was raw and unmistakable. Victoria, surprisingly, reached across the table and touched Sylvie's hand. Her voice was quiet, vulnerable, a stark contrast to her usual defensive tone. Sylvie, she said, her eyes glistening. I am so sorry, too. I had this idea in my head, this story I created, and I let it fester into years of cruelty. My insecurities got the better of me, and I projected them onto you. There's no excuse for what I did. I truly am sorry. Sylvie's heart ached. The apology, so unexpected, so genuine, broke through the last vestiges of her resentment. It's a lot of lost time, Victoria, she acknowledged, her voice thick. So much lost time. Victoria nodded, tears finally rolling down her cheeks. It is. But maybe we can start to get some of it back. There was a genuine willingness in her eyes, a desire to listen, to heal, that Sylvie hadn't believed possible just an hour ago. After the main course, as dessert was being served, Sylvie reached into her large, elegant handbag. She pulled out a small, leather-bound photo album. Ethan, she said, handing it to him. I put this together for you. It's full of pictures of you and your grandpa Arthur, from when you were little. Each one has a note, something your grandpa or I remembered about that day. Ethan took the album, his eyes wide. He opened it carefully, his thumb tracing the worn leather. On the first page, a sepia-toned photo showed a tiny Ethan, no more than 3, sitting on Arthur's lap, both of them beaming at a book. Beneath it, in Sylvie's neat handwriting, was the caption, Your grandpa always said your curiosity was boundless, even then. You asked 1,000 questions about the pictures in this book, and he answered every single one, never once losing patience. Ethan's face softened, a wistful smile playing on his lips. I don't remember this, he whispered, deeply moved by the forgotten memory. Victoria, who had been watching, leaned in, her head close to Ethan's. Let me see, she said, her voice filled with a genuine curiosity that Sylvie hadn't heard from her in years. She looked at the photos, her brow furrowed slightly. I haven't heard many of these stories. Arthur always seemed so quiet when I knew him. Sylvie smiled gently. He was a quiet man, but he loved his family fiercely, especially his grandson. Victoria looked up from the album, her eyes meeting Sylvie's. Sylvie, she began, her voice still a little shaky. Would you be willing to have lunch with me next weekend? Just the two of us. You could bring more of these photos. and tell me some of those stories." It was an olive branch, tentative and a little awkward, but deeply sincere. Sylvie felt a warmth spread through her chest. This was it. The chance. "I would like that very much, Victoria," she replied, a genuine smile gracing her lips. Ethan, his eyes still on the album, reached out and hugged Sylvie again, tightly. "Grandma," he whispered. "This graduation day certainly didn't go as expected, but I'm so glad the truth finally came out. I love you." Later, as the reception wound down, Daniel approached Sylvie. "Mom, please, don't go back to your hotel tonight. Come stay with us. We have plenty of room." Victoria, standing beside him, nodded earnestly. "Yes, Sylvie. Please." It would mean a lot, walking out to the parking lot together, the setting sun casting long shadows. Sylvie felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced in years. The healing would be a long, arduous journey, she knew, filled with difficult conversations and lingering shadows of the past. But for the first time in what felt like forever, there was hope. Arthur's wisdom echoed in her mind. The truth will always find its way to the light. Her obscure seat in Section G, the place of her deepest humiliation, had paradoxically illuminated everything, ripping open old wounds to allow a new, tentative beginning to bloom.